I'm very pleased to welcome you today to today's television broadcast on behalf of the Foundation of Laguna Woods Village. Today's broadcast is part of a new initiative of the Foundation called Planning for the Inevitable. And this broadcast will be part of a series which will look at different aspects of this topic. I'm sure many in the audience are familiar with the Foundation. We are the local village charity that steps in and provides temporary financial assistance when residents face hard financial times. Our motto is neighbors helping neighbors. And over the years, that concept of help has broadened. We supported the vaccination effort in the village. We are working with Memorial Care to provide full prevention workshops, and we are currently renting emergency response devices for people who are at risk for falls. When we talk about planning for the inevitable, what we're really looking at are decisions that we should face before it's too late. Yet, for whatever reasons, many of us avoid those decisions. I am Marcy Scheinwald. I'm the president of the Foundation, and I know the importance of facing those decisions early on. Recently, my partner was admitted to Saddleback Hospital as an emergency admission and underwent quadruple bypass. As I was in the hospital with him, I realized that I didn't know what his wishes were if a problem developed during surgery. I really didn't know which one of his children was the decision maker if a problem developed, and I had absolutely no clue as to what his insurance was to plan for his aftercare. As a result, I've come to realize the importance of what we call a medical directive, or what some people call an advance directive. And even more important, I realized how important it was to have conversations with those closest to us about what our healthcare wishes with us, with what our healthcare wishes are. With us today to explore this topic are two physicians from Memorial Care Saddleback Hospital. The first is Dr. Matthew Jansen, who is the medical director of the hospital's hospice program. As I understand it, he has dual board certifications, one in emergency care and the other in hospice and palliative care. Also with us today is Dr. Larry Tran, who is the inpatient medical director for Saddleback Hospital. He is board certified in internal medicine, and he also oversees all of the employed hospitalists employed by Memorial Care in Orange County. What I'd like to start off with this today, Dr. Jansen, when I met with you recently, you told me about an instance where a woman had a stroke and she was unable to communicate. And when you talked to her children, they had no idea what her wishes are. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Absolutely, I'd be happy to. This was a 76-year-old woman who had been active and healthy and led a very interesting and active lifestyle. And suddenly, out of the clear blue sky, she was struck by a stroke that affected the left side of her brain. And as a result of that stroke, she had weakness in the right side of her body, and that meant that she was going to be dependent on a lot of assistance for the rest of her life, maybe not able to walk again. And unfortunately, because the left side of the brain controls language, She was not able to speak and articulate herself, and it wasn't clear how much of what we told her and communicated to her she understood. And also, the stroke had affected her ability to swallow. And so we were in a situation where we were considering starting artificial nutrition. I'm talking about as a feeding tube she would need for the rest of her life. And so this single event had changed and dramatically impacted so many parts of her life. And we were looking for guidance on what would be most important to her, what her priorities were, what she wanted from us in terms of the best quality health care. And she was unable to give us those answers. And unfortunately, we didn't know who to turn to. We didn't know if there were family members who could give us assistance. We didn't know if there were close friends. And so we were in an unfortunate position where we had to provide this woman with the best care we could provide, but there was really nobody who could speak for her, nobody who could speak on her behalf.
Dr. Tran, have you ever experienced a situation like that?
I fear that it actually has become too much the rule rather than the exception. I fear that we've had these circumstances occur a lot, especially in the inpatient world, where we wait for a catastrophe to occur and then we start trying to figure out how to mitigate it. There's so many other steps in life where we plan for what it's like to turn 18, to go away to college or to start your adult life, what it's like to conclude your work and move into retirement. We plan for all of those things. But when it comes to one of the most important challenges and sometimes some of the unforeseeable events, it's not that we don't even plan, we don't even want to talk about it, we don't want to consider it, and we certainly don't spend enough time sharing our feelings, our values with our loved ones.
Dr. Jansen, what can we do in situations like that so we don't wind up like that woman, unable to communicate, and we don't know how to get the information that's important to plan for her future care?
Well, it's an excellent question, and I should say the first thing that we should do is exactly what you are undertaking here, to bring the topic up, to make it less of a taboo, to make it something we can talk about as individuals and as a society. So the first step is addressing the issue head on. It is something we need to plan for because it is something we're all facing at some point in our lives. The second thing we need to do is to talk with the people closest to us, our spouses, our siblings, our children, our close friends, because those are the people who are involved in our lives now and will be involved in our lives then. They will be some of the people that physicians turn to when needed. And then the third thing that's important to do is not just have these conversations and not just discuss these matters, but to try to write this down so that your wishes are clear, so that your goals are clear, so your values are clear, so that even if you cannot speak for your voice, this document can still make sure that your voice is heard.
Okay, who do we write this document with? Dr. Tran, do you have?
I think probably the person who most needs to be included in the conversation is the patient, who has agency in decision making and can really share what's important to them, and then for them to be closely advised by the medical professionals who best know their own personal health and can help guide them. The medical professional should not be the decision maker, but they should be there as an expert, somebody who can help make sure that you understand all the key facts that will be valuable in your calculus in whatever decision it is. And it's exactly like Dr. Jansen had said, it's built on the foundation of putting it down on paper and having that conversation. But it's even more important is that you have those frequently with your loved ones, because we can change, paperwork can be lost. But if those around us truly know what's important to us and have heard that in repeated fashion, they are better able to really speak for us and advocate on what's important to us.
When you say a writing, is that what we mean by a medical directive or an advance directive?
That's exactly right. There is a formal document that's known as an advanced healthcare directive. That is a medical legal document. So it has importance both in the realm of medicine and in the realm of law. And that is a document that will express exactly who you want to speak on your behalf if you cannot speak for yourself, a general explanation of what your values are and what your preferences for healthcare are, and then some very specific statements about what's important to you in that very final stage of life. And that's a document that can be completed ideally with the assistance of your primary care physician any specialists who are important in your healthcare, and of course your family.
When you said in describing that document, you talked about somebody that can be turned to make decisions if you're not able to. Is that what we mean by an agent for decision making?
That is exactly correct. Excuse me. We talk about somebody who is a surrogate medical decision maker. So,
Does it have to be a family member?
an excellent question. The answer is absolutely not. So always we turn to the patient first. As long as the patient is able to express their desires, we follow that as the absolute rule. But in a case where a patient cannot express their desires, for whatever reason, either in the short term or in the long term, then we want to know who to turn to, who knows this person well, and who can speak on their behalf. And that certainly can be a family member. It can be a spouse, it can be children, but it does not need to be a family member. Sometimes the best agents, the best surrogates, are very close friends, friends you've spent the last 20 years of your life with, and who you've had these intimate conversations with. So it can be a friend, it can be a pastor. The only requirement is that somebody that knows you well and is able to speak effectively on your behalf and be your advocate when you most need an advocate.
Okay, I was thinking of the fact that I have two daughters. I'm not sure that they would look at this situation the same way, and I've designated both of them. Dr. Tran, what if you have more than one agent and they don't agree?
Well, I think that that is one of the biggest pitfalls of both filling out the form, but also thinking about this in such a binary fashion that there is, these two folks are being asked to make a decision. Ultimately, when this is done right, these folks, whomever you have empowered, whether it's 1 or 100, are there to voice what is best for you, what they believe you want, what they believe you value, what quality of life is important to you. And that is when it is done best. And when it is done most poorly is when it comes down to a situation where the agents are speaking for themselves, their wants, their insecurities. They are talking about traumas from childhood past or from other issues that they're resolving from within, and not ultimately considering what is in the best interest of the person laying in that bed. And so that is one pitfall that I see happen frequently. They need to be reminded that their role is to speak on your behalf about what matters to you, not for themselves on what matters to them. And I think that that is something that is critical for everybody who's involved in the process to understand. It is something that we don't put enough time and energy into. Much like what Dr. Jansen was saying, is that these forms are frequently filled out and folks believe that they have immediate power over you. And again, I want to go back to that word agency, is so long as you have medical capacity, so long as you understand what is in front of you, you should be the one who make your own decisions. And we should all respect that based upon the fact that it is your life. You are living with the consequences of all of those decisions. And we are here to value and respect that. And conversely, which is also hard for loved ones to do sometimes, is to recognize when we may have lost that agency, when we no longer have medical capacity, where we do not fully understand or comprehend the consequences of our decisions. Sometimes I see our loved ones reach out to those who don't have that capacity to get permission to speak for you. And that is when I encourage them to go back to how you've lived your core life, the rubric with which you have judged your decision making on, and to speak again for the you who we have known through all these years, rather than for you in the moment who may be compromised.
Okay, I can see situations where an agent might be called on to make a decision and they're uncomfortable with it, that the ramifications of what they're doing becomes overwhelming.
Absolutely.
Dr. Jansen, have you ever encountered that?
I have, and it's agonizing. It's agonizing for somebody who has been thrust into this position of being an agent, being a surrogate, and having to make these heartbreaking decisions in a time of incredible personal conflict. It's agonizing to see. it's an incredible burden for a spouse to bear or a child to bear, to have to make these life and death decisions, because sometimes they are life and death decisions. And I have seen families torn apart by that.
And what do you do in those situations? Is there a way that the physician helps them through the dilemma?
We do our very best, but what I have found is that in families where these conversations have taken place and where a person has made it clear, this is what I want, this is what's important to me, this is what I definitely don't want. When the person has made that clear, has told their family, has told their loved ones, then when we have different people who get together, even if they have their own opinions, even if they have their own preferences, they can all agree together, this is what Dad wanted, this is what Mom wanted, and we're going to come together as a family to support what Mom wanted, to speak for what Dad wanted. And then instead of families being torn apart, they're really pulled together in this most important time. And that's what Dr. Tran and I work to do. We try to bring people together and say, you all know this same man, you all love this same man. What would he say if he was speaking here today? And very often, families can say that. They can put aside their differences and agree, if Dad was here, he would say, I definitely want this, I definitely don't want that. So that's what we work for.
Okay. I know in talking to you, Dr. Jansen, before today, we talked about medical directives in general. There is a particular form that you mentioned to me, the post form. Does that take the place of a medical directive, or is that a different type of document?
It's an excellent question. The answer to your question is that it does not take the place of a medical directive. The medical directive that we've talked about is a multi-page document that covers a lot of different aspects of what's important to a person at all stages of their life. The post form, which I'm sure you have seen, I'm sure many of your viewers have seen, is this bright pink form.
It looks like a Barbie document, right?
It does. It does. And it speaks to just a very few simple questions that might be important to know when time is in the essence. It says what a person wants if, heaven forbid, their heart stops or their breathing stops. It says what a person wants in terms of how aggressive they want care to be. And it says what a person wants in terms of whether they would want artificial nutrition ever, only for a short time. And the value of this post form is that it's a single page where this critical information is provided. And that means it can be easily taken with the patient wherever the patient might go. So where we find it most helpful is if the paramedics are called to somebody's home, there may not be time to find the advanced healthcare directive. There may not be time to go through all the paperwork in the office or open a safe. But if this bright pink post form is available, the paramedics can grab that, bring it into the hospital, bring it into the emergency department, and that way that patient's voice, their wishes, will be known when it's most important for their voice to be heard and their wishes to be known.
How does somebody get a post form?
There are two good ways. One way is to simply print it off of the online websites. California has a website where there are post forms in multiple different languages. But I would recommend that you get it from your primary care physician, because your primary care physician can talk you through it, explain what all of the choices mean, what all of the options mean, and also the primary care physician can give you some insight onto what might be the best choices for you, what he would recommend, what she wouldn't recommend. And so my preference would be to encourage people to go to their primary care physician and ask for the bright pink post form.
Are there any, I know some people talk about power of attorney. How does that fit in with what we've been discussing so far? Dr. Tran?
Well, I think power of attorney has several dimensions, one of which is power of attorney for health care. So it speaks to who you would want to be a surrogate decision maker, like Dr. Jansen had mentioned earlier, in case you were incapacitated. You were in a situation where you could not, due to mental or physical reasons, speak on your own behalf. That's when a power of attorney for health care would come into play. And you can assign that through legal forms. And that is usually the manner in which most folks receive their post forms. It is an appended document behind several reams of paper when you're setting up a trust or some other legal financial tool. and is not done with the advice of a physician. And that's the greatest challenge of it, is that folks who are not in the medical field do not understand and respect the nuance with which the form should be filled out with, and the counsel with which should come along with that document. It is not a static decision that you make at one time, but it should be one that is constantly evolving. It should vary based upon our station in life, what our own medical and specifically mental and physical frailties have evolved over time, what new medical illnesses have occurred. And so that form should change with us and should be filled out again, and it should be discussed with our loved ones repeatedly. And it should not be thought of as one of these menu items where I'll take a little bit from column A and a little bit from column B. This is to give us a very brief but accurate assessment of what matters to you. If you are not well, what things you would want, and more clearly, what things no longer make sense for you in your end of life.
I think what you're saying is very important, because I think of the fact that I filled out an advance directive when I set up my trust, when I moved to California 12 years ago. And what I was thinking 12 years ago is not what I think today.
Absolutely.
So I think what you're suggesting, Dr. Jansen, is that we update our advance directive and I guess who we designate as an agent.
That's correct. We recommend that people reevaluate their advanced healthcare directive frequently, and that's every few years or after any significant change in a person's health. And there may be times when it's appropriate to change a surrogate from one person to another. But it is best if these forms and if these conversations are reviewed frequently.
We've talked about a lot of things today, but I think one of the things that you have been stressing are the conversations that we should have with those closest to us to know what our healthcare wishes are. As we end today's broadcast, Dr. Jansen, what would you like the audience to best remember, or the most important thing for them to know?
It's an excellent question, and I've thought about it a lot. I think we have to acknowledge that for all of us, illness is inevitable. For all of us, at some point, the end of life is inevitable. But what is not inevitable is the miscommunication, the loss of agency, and the possibility of suffering unnecessarily or having an experience in life that is not what one wants it to be. That is not inevitable. And the way to maintain agency, to make sure your voice is heard, is to do exactly what we've been discussing, to have these conversations with the people important to us, to put our wishes down in paper, and to make sure that that's something that's understood by family and so they can communicate it by physicians. And that gives people the most control over every part of their life until the very end, whenever that comes.
Dr. Tran, would you like to add something?
Certainly. Thank you so much for the opportunity to be here and to talk about this very important topic. I guess for me, to sum it up in one sentence, is that it is always easier to do more than to do better. But ultimately, I think that is what we are aspiring to do, is to do better. Showing acts of love and showing faith and commitment to our loved ones by doing more on their behalf is not always what is in their best interest. And I think what we need to constantly assess ourselves and judge ourselves by is, did we do better? Did we meet what they wanted? Did we keep them at the core of the conversation? And did we make this about them and not about us?
As the two of you were summing up, I was thinking of the fact that my lawyer gave me the advance directive, but no conversation ever occurred. And that really my task after today is to sit down with my daughters and have that conversation. I want to thank both of you very, very much. I think you've explained the issues, and I think you've left the audience with a great deal to think about. What I do want to say is, if people have questions after today for either Dr. Jansen or Dr. Tran, to please contact the foundation, because we will make sure that their questions are passed on. Our telephone number is 949-268-2246, or you can always reach us via email at thefoundation@comline.com. One of the things that we all know is that planning for the inevitable is something that we should all do. Thank you again, gentlemen.